Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and I'm sure many of you have been waiting for this final part of my proposition of the Halo Infinite. Now, to really briefly recap, this is basically the idea that Halo Infinite was intended on being 10 years worth of content, and of course, unfortunately, the campaign team at 343 Industries were let go, and basically all campaign DLC was cancelled. This may be on the change now, as there does seem to be evidence that some people are being brought on board to work on perhaps future campaign stories, but until we know anything concrete, we're going to assume all Halo Infinite DLC for the campaign has been cancelled. And this series was basically my interpretation of what could have happened for the DLC for Halo Infinite. Bearing in mind that Halo Infinite was a soft reboot of the franchise, and the Infinite campaign that we got was not dissimilar to the second level of Halo CE, and not a lot else. And I quite liked the idea that each year we would get a DLC that would expand the campaign narrative and extrapolate out an entire campaign based around each respective level of Halo CE, loosely, while tying in tons of other aspects of the lore. So this is part 3 of a 3-part series, so if you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, they are linked in the description down below and in the top comment. I strongly recommend you go and watch those first. But for those of you who are up to speed, let's continue with the campaign DLC to be launched in 2028, a recreation of 2 betrayals called Enemy of My Enemy. 2 Betrayals, or Enemy of My Enemy, starts off where we left off at the end of the Library, or the Activation Index DLC, launched in 2027. You've just got aboard the Pelican, Echo 216, and are moving towards the crash site of the Infinity, where the other UNSC forces are currently staged. En route, Echo 216 begins to intercept radio chatter that shows a large, staged conflict is taking place in the snowy valleys on the way to the Infinity. Echo 216 drops you off on what looks like an expansive, snowy void. The weapon brings up a waypoint and you begin moving your way towards it as a blizzard sets in. Within the blizzard itself, endless and banished stalker squads are hunting you. Moving from cover to cover, you work your way towards some distant lights you can barely see through the snow. As you close on it, you realise it's 2 large Covenant-era shield barrier generators. The energy forks of one of the generators are glistening in the snow while the other is still dark. Good. Had they have actually activated both of these barriers, your pathway would be blocked by a nearly impenetrable energy barrier. Quickly closing on the 2 structures, a perimeter of sentry turrets come into view. Luckily, these have yet to be activated either. The banished forces in the area have been quickly setting these up to cut off UNSC reinforcements and seal up one of a very few access ways into the icy valleys below that plays host to the Infinity. Chief closes on the perimeter, and quite eerily, as he nears the sentry turrets, the blizzard comes to an abrupt stop, as if the very weather in this area is being repelled by some unseen force, and the air beyond is uncomfortably still and quiet. Chief begins clearing out the resident banished forces, moving through the first tower base and into a subterranean area between the 2 bases that is irrevocably Forerunner. The weapon informs that the structure, and many more of its nearby subterranean areas, are high-order power conduits for the Halo's firing mechanism, and that the immense level of energy flowing just below its surface causes the rather uneasy calm above due to the nature of vacuum energy. Chief clears the second tower and its surrounding area of banished forces and goes to continue through when 216 reports in that large quantities of reinforcements are inbound on Chief's position. It's now up to Chief and the weapon to prevent these reinforcements from overwhelming their position and losing control of this pivotal site on the doorstep of the Infinity. The weapon suggests plugging her into the second tower generator and let her get it active to raise the energy barrier, preventing the banished reinforcements from advancing, but also maintaining control of the area so UNSC forces can move through or extract. Chief agrees and quickly takes her to the second tower and plugs her in. Unfortunately, banished forces are already inbound. The first flight of Phantoms have already arrived. Chief then has to hold the area from numerous waves of Banished in a very firefight kind of manner. Periodically, the weapon chimes in and asks Chief to plug in a Covenant power conduit, or activate a terminal pass-through, or plug in some power seeds, or access the facility below to filter more of the Foreigner energy to the surface. The weapon also suggests that Chief venture quickly out to the perimeter of sentry turrets and prime them for activation. This is optional, but if you do take the risk amongst the constantly replenishing ranks of Banished, the weapon rewards you by bringing the turrets online and using them to thin out the Banished reinforcements. Echo 216 reports in that large waves of Banished and Endless are now moving through the blizzard towards your location, including a Banished Scarab. And the quantity of forces are far too great to hold the position much longer. Chief helps the weapon bring the last systems online and powers on the second tower. The two resonate with each other, and an energy barrier sparks to life right as the Scarab looms into view and fires its main cannon. The blast harmlessly dissipates across the barrier, and it is moments later that the Swords of Sanghelios report that they're in pursuit of the forces outside the barrier. From the relative safety inside, you can watch as the Banished forces turn to confront the swords, and a massive battle ensues. Chief retrieves the weapon and moves to the narrow pass that feeds through to the valleys below. The pass winds its way deeper and deeper into the valleys, eventually coming to a Foreigner door that leads you through numerous internal facilities, including an older version of the phase pulse generators, and finally, after descending a long elevator, lets out at a massive staging area where the Swords of Sanghelios and UNSC forces have set up a huge forward operating base in the shadow of the downed Infinity. She is badly damaged and probably won't fly again, with huge chunks missing from her hull, exposing interior areas including the engine room, many of the hangar bays, and it is clear from the way she lays upon the surface of the ring that her spine is broken. Her massive form lays 5 kilometers along the ring, with her nose precariously hanging over the retaining wall of Zeta Halo. The heat from her exposed reactor has thawed some of the frozen tundra in the area, and huge glacial melt flows over her from a higher altitude mountain, making her look oddly beautiful and picturesque in this setting. From here, you can do various side missions, or pick up target dossiers and rescue imprisoned UNSC and elite forces, and even move with a Spec Ops Sangheli team to perform high-value missions critical to establishing a stronger hold on the ring. The Infinity presents a huge range of side missions and tasks to complete, and interestingly enough, presents a lore reason for the multiplayer once more. Now, the normal menus in Halo Infinite at this stage are still present, however you can now seamlessly switch between campaign, multiplayer, firefight experiences without leaving the game. If you walk Chief into the Infinity and towards the Spartan deck, where the wargame simulations are taking place to keep the Spartan sharp, once Chief enters this area, a cutscene takes over and Chief walks towards the armor bay to have his suit serviced. As this happens, Chief walks past another Spartan wearing your armor and gives them a nod. Your Spartan nods back, and the camera now follows them out of the S deck and to the wargame simulation deck. Here you can access a terminal which opens up your HUD and gives you access to matchmaking, firefight, customs games, and Forge. You can navigate from here and jump into whatever multiplayer experience you choose, and when you're done, either quit out entirely or keep the experience going, return to S deck, and see Chief leaving the armor bay. You cross paths once more, and you resume Chief's journey through the campaign. Now, don't tell me that wouldn't be cool, and let's be honest, we're in the year 2028 right here, so technically speaking, they'd have 5 years from now to make that happen, and it is doable. If they can make MCC working with several different game engines, campaigns, multiplayer experiences alongside mod support, they can make this happen. Anyway, back with Chief, and we've secured the activation index, and it's being examined by the weapon and Roland and several other UNSC scientists aboard the Infinity, and the results are clear. The activation index can be used at the control room for more than just firing the ring, but it can be used elsewhere on the ring as well. And the Endless know this. Roland has been deciphering conversation and communications between Endless and Banished, and an unpleasant reality has come to light. The entirety of Zeta Halo is held in a time lock. This is a little known about feature of the rings, but is in fact lore accurate. The rings possess the ability to isolate themselves from the normal passage of space and time. In truth, for nearly the 100,000 years that Zeta Halo has been existing since the Forerunner Flood War came to an end and the Endless were imprisoned, the ring has been held in time-lock stasis. Basically, the local time for the ring, despite still seeming to pass normally to those upon its surface, is in fact held nearly the entire 100,000 years in the past due to the time dilation effect. The problem here is that in this suspended state, anyone outside of the ring's immediate area, anywhere else in the galaxy, have no idea that Chief, the weapon, the Infinity, or the Swords of Sanghelios are even here. Chief questions here how the Swords of Sanghelios got here, and the answer is because their ship was sent here via slipspace portals opened by entities unknown as they were still searching for the remnants of the Sanshyam species. The Endless know this information and are trying to find a way out. They will eventually figure out how to do this, and they will be unleashed upon the galaxy, and who knows what they'll be capable of. All that is certain is that they have no care for humanity. There seems to be an uncomfortable relationship between the Zalanin and the Flood, and ultimately even the Forerunners saw it necessary to imprison them here. So whatever happens, the Endless, the Banished, and the Flood cannot be allowed to leave the ring. And Roland thinks he knows a way to make this happen. Since the whole ring is in time lock, if the time lock was turned off, the ring's local spacetime would accelerate to reconcile the difference between it and the rest of the galaxy. This would have the effect of having 100,000 years pass in moments. That would kill anything and everything on the ring that couldn't live to be over 100 millennia old. Chief interjects here and informs quite clearly that the Flood seemingly can live for this duration, at least in spore form, and they still can't be certain that the Endless can't live for that long. Roland accepts the Chief's experience here, but counters that the physical forms, the combat forms, carrier forms, and pure forms, are still bound by the basic rules of entropy, and that they disintegrate, and all that would be left that would be of concern would be the spores. But with the infection still relatively isolated on the ring, they should be able to contain it with the full might of the UNSC and the elites when they drop back into normal time. Lasky correctly realizes that if they're on the ring too when this happens, they won't survive the passage of time either. Chief suggests getting everyone into cryo, but Lasky interjects and says that Infinity doesn't have the power to keep all of the cryopods online for 100,000 years, which, although to anyone else it would be in moments, it would still, to the people within the time lock, be experienced as if 100,000 years were passing. Lasky explains it's just as likely that the power would go out halfway through and kill them all in the process. Roland steps in once more and suggests there may be a way to avoid it, and he thinks the Endless are looking for it too. There had to be a way to circumnavigate the time locks for the Forerunners, but of course the Forerunners wouldn't have landed or interacted with the ring in the way that the Infinity and the other forces here on Zeta Halo have by simply landing upon its surface. They would have cycled through one of the normal docking procedures, and it's there that the access out back into normal space and normal time may be possible. The cutscene changes here to the control room of Zeta Halo, where a similar conversation has taken place between Atriox and the Endless. Atriox is visibly concerned and arguing with the Endless, who are quite dismissive of his concerns. When they continue to ignore him, he activates his gravity mace and slams it on the ground to gain their attention. The Endless focus on him briefly. He argues that the time lock on the ring will keep everyone stranded as long as it stands, but that deactivating it will kill him, his Banished, the humans, the Flood, and the Endless, and he demands to know what they plan to do. One of the Endless move towards him, speaking slowly and deliberately, as if to a child, which only serves to antagonize him further. They explain there is a breach, a passageway that will release them from the ring's time lock and bleed off the reconciliation, leaving them unharmed, but that the breach lies deep within the ring, and between them and the breach lays the thickest infestation of the Flood, and that as far as the ring's records are concerned, there is only one vessel docked and ready to pass through this passage. It is at this point that Aatrox argues that they can simply burn their way through the Flood to reach the breach, but the Endless counter and explain the very reason the Flood are there are to prevent lower species from doing such a thing. They ask Aatrox why he believes that they'd allow that. Aatrox now begins to see the truth. The Endless released the Flood to guard their way out. The Endless and the Flood are one and the same. The Endless have only their own survival in mind and would betray the Banished in spite of their assistance in releasing them in the first place. Aatrox's rage boils and the Endless attack. Aatrox swats one aside with his mace but is immediately set upon by another. His banished bodyguards come to his aid but are ultimately just a temporary distraction. Aatrox runs clear of the control room as his banished are slaughtered behind him. The first betrayal has come to pass. He runs back outside to his forces who have gathered in the shadow of the control room and realizes an uneasy truth, that without the Endless, he has not the numbers or the might required to fight through the breach to escape the ring, and it's likely the Endless will either leave them here indefinitely or drop the time lock upon their escape and kill them all. He realizes the only chance of survival is to partner with the humans and the elites. He quickly makes for a phantom. Time cannot be wasted. He briefly explains to his captains that he is going to parley with the humans and elites, and that he hasn't got the time to explain, but to simply trust him. His banished refuse this course of action. Aatrox turns and attempts to explain, but is duty-bound by the honour of him being the leader that he shouldn't have to explain himself. A flaw of the Juralhane's culture that would cost him dearly. In his moment of attempting to reassert his authority, he is cut off by one of his captains, who argues that their situation has only gone from bad to worse under his leadership. Aatrox reminds him how he uplifted the Banished, and the captain agrees that he did uplift the Banished, but as of late, he has evidently demonstrated he is far past his prime, and that it is time that he step aside and allow a new strength to lead the Banished, and that only the Endless, at this moment, present a strength powerful enough to stand a chance at success. The Endless emerge from the control room at this point, and ever the manipulators begin to sway the Banished in their favour, despite Aatrox knowing full well that they intend the Banished to perish. And the Banished fall for it, while Aatrox tries desperately to convince them otherwise, but ultimately only makes himself look more weak. The Endless order Aatrox's capture. He defends himself viciously, attacking the Banished that attempt to stop him. He is mortally wounded in the process, but manages to get aboard the Phantom and fly clear, while he is still being shot at. And we finally have two betrayals. The betrayal of the Endless and the betrayal of Aatrox. And so closes The Enemy of My Enemy DLC, released 2028. 2029 sees the return of another Infinite DLC and something of a recreation of the level Keys. This one is titled Lasky. This DLC starts at the Infinity, and it's made abundantly clear that facilities that harbour the energy pylons and temporal reconciliation devices to activate the temporal breach are within the facility deep below the Infinity herself. After bringing these devices online, all of the UNSC forces and the Swords of Sanghelios would then need to traverse within the bowels of the ring to the breach itself, which is a few kilometers upspin. But nothing can be done until the breach is active. And unfortunately, this facility is filled with Banished, Endless, and worst of all, the Flood. The Flood are seemingly fighting everyone except the Endless, and the Banished haven't noticed this yet. Yet the UNSC and the elites have. This will come into play later. The UNSC forces move through the facilities deep below the Infinity, moving deeper and deeper. On their trek deep within the bowels of Zeta Halo, there are many encounters with Banished, Flood, Endless, and even the Sentinels guarding Zeta Halo. After finally getting to the deepest point of the facility, they get to the pylons and have to activate these energy pylons so the reconciliation devices will power on. After getting to the respective energy pylons and getting them online and then activating the reconciliation device itself, all the while still fighting through Banished and Flood, the limited UNSC forces, Chief included, who are still alive at this point, begin to extract to the surface. It's at this point that reports come through that Lasky is in trouble. The rest of the UNSC return topside while Chief goes hunting for Lasky to assist. Lasky and Palmer had unfortunately led a team to secure a system that would prime the activation index to open the breach and deactivate the time lock. In order to do this, the activation index needed to be taken to a specific facility and put into a very specific terminal to receive the upgrade and enable the permissions. Only then could it be taken to the breach to actually activate it and release themselves from the time lock. Chief moves to Lasky's last known position to aid, but it's flood infested. This doesn't look good. There are other marine bodies that have been too damaged to be flood infested, but there is also a high population of human flood forms in this area. Chief is now dreading finding Lasky in the same way that he found Jacob Keyes in 2552. After navigating through several flood-infested facilities, he finally comes into contact with Palmer and Lasky, who are still alive. The rest of the team had been killed along the way, and Palmer is severely injured. Lasky is okay at the moment, but they're in a bad way and need to be extracted. He is wearing a version of marine armour that is a sealed system to keep him alive in this infested hive. Chief aids Lasky and Palmer in getting to the terminal and getting the index upgraded. Palmer is injured further and ultimately succumbs to her injuries. Lasky mourns her death, and Chief says a few poignant words to rouse him once more. They begin moving back through the facility to the surface and back to the Infinity. An ambush catches them off guard, and a very well coordinated flood put up a powerful offensive. They both manage to fight them back, but Lasky's suit is breached, and he begins to inhale spores and begins to cough. Chief realizes he has been partially infected. Chief has seen someone go through the accelerated mutation before, but this wasn't that, so there was still hope. Lasky slowly becomes more and more debilitated by this slow-growing infection, almost choking on it from moment to moment. Chief tries desperately to extract him. He realizes that Lasky can't actually keep up, so Chief drops his weapon and lifts Lasky, sprinting to extract him as fast as possible. He moves through some chambers and realizes the odds are ultimately against him. With only a sidekick, Chief prepares to defend Lasky to his final breath, laying Lasky on the ground and standing over him as hordes of flood move towards him. Right as his fate seems sealed, Chief fires his sidekick as fast as it will cycle and ultimately empties the clip. And as he reloads, a massive form blasts past him and attacks the flood, clears the area with aggressive attacks and ripples of aggressive red energy. Chief had seen this before and immediately levels his pistol. Atriox turns to face the Chief, deactivating his energy mace, and then lifts his palms up in a peaceful gesture and begins to explain that things on the ring are changing, and he sees that the only chance that they have to survive is by working together. Chief can see that Aatrox is injured. It probably wouldn't be too much of a challenge to take Aatrox down despite how formidable Aatrox has been. But they're in a desperate situation, and the wound is quite clearly from banished weaponry. Despite this grievous wound, Aatrox is still in a damned sight better condition than Lasky and Chief. Chief comes to the same conclusion as Aatrox and asks him to clear the way so they can extract Lasky. Aatrox agrees and moves ahead. Chief carries Lasky while Aatrox fights back Flood. They finally get to a relatively clear area and pass through a particular area of this facility that is meant for Flood security, and it generates a rippling energy field that, when passed through, will destroy Flood biomass. Unfortunately, they don't know this. They move through the sterilization beam, and it destroys the Flood matter, but leaves healthy tissue unaffected. Lasky collapses entirely. A quick scan of him reveals large sections of his internal organs have been burned away. Chief administers biofoam, scoops him up, and sprints to the extraction. Chief calls ahead to Infinity to tell them about Lasky's critical condition, and Chief, knowing that he's been in this kind of a situation before, demands a cryopod in the hangar upon arrival. When they arrive, Chief paces towards the cryopod and places him within. It activates and puts Lasky into cryosleep, stalling his impended death, just like he did for Linda so many years ago. The scene fades to black. Slowly, Lasky begins to open his eyes. From a first-person perspective, we see a medical room and medical room lights. He shades his eyes from the light, and that's when he notices the partially healed sutures on his hands. He tried to get up, but is prevented by the Chief stepping up and stopping him, simply saying, "It's okay." The perspective changes to the room as Halsey and a few others move to Lasky's side. He asks what happened. Chief begins to recount the events leading up to Lasky's final collapse. It's at this point Roland takes over. "When we got you back to the Infinity, the only way we could buy time was to put you into cryo. The weapon pulled your medical records and discovered your cryosickness history. Your injuries were mounting up. You were wounded with broken bones, penetrative injuries, and shrapnel." Halsey steps in. "Many of your organs were infected by the Flood supercell, and upon passing through the Flood sterilization beam at the facility's entrance, it purged those infected tissues, leaving huge voids and trauma to the remaining organs. We were concerned you still carried dormant Flood particles, and assuming we managed to fix all of this, your immune system would flood your body with histamine in response to the cryosleep upon waking." Roland then speaks up again. "Halsey suggested giving you some pretty major surgeries, as well as some low-level augmentations, enhancing healing factor, rebuild your bones, replace some of your damaged organs with flash clones, some minor gene therapies to flush your system of Flood infestation. It was a logical plan, but given how extensively you were injured and the type of surgeries that would be required to get you back to full strength, we collectively made the decision for you to put you through the Project Orchid Spartan 4 augmentation procedures. It gave you the best chance of making a better than full recovery. Lasky is now a Spartan 4, an unwilling participant, but he's alive." The door to the medical room chimed, and through the door, the massive form of Aatrox ducks through. Lasky is surprised and tenses to see him, yet Aatrox immediately puts him at ease and begins to explain. A flashback then takes place where you actually play as Aatrox, flying a phantom being pursued by Banished and Endless. No real destination, just looking for human forces he can attempt to ally with. The Phantom finally gets shot down and crash lands, and Aatrox climbs free and fights the Banished pursuing him. He manages to kill them all, but overhears on the Banished battlenet that there are humans nearby. Aatrox climbs into a ghost and begins fighting his way through the Banished and Flood forces. News that he is no longer the leader of the Banished has evidently circulated already, and in a level similar to Uprising from Halo 2, Aatrox fights through to where the humans are. There is a large battle taking place, and Aatrox quickly gets to work killing the Banished from behind, working his way towards the humans. The humans have retreated into a facility, locking the doors behind them. Aatrox is now stuck out here with the Banished. He does what he has to, killing them, to survive. He takes no pleasure in it, but it is what is necessary. It's either him or them. After clearing the area, he looks for an alternate route to the humans and begins moving through a large clearing that gradually climbs in altitude. He climbs higher and higher, killing any Banished and Flood he finds along the way, and after climbing up high enough that the air drew thin and he found it difficult to breathe, he follows a narrow pass between two snow-capped mountains. The pass led down to the other side into a snowy tundra, where it eventually opened up into a large glacial area with a large Forerunner power station protruding from the snow. Many of you will recognize this as being something approximating Avalanche. After fighting through Banished and Flood forces in this area, Aatrox finds his way to the opposite side, where he enters the Forerunner structure and follows it through. He emerges from the other side within a rusted Forerunner structure with a large sloping barrier gate. This one is very similar to Containment from Halo 2. He activates it and it retracts into the ground, and hordes of Flood are on the other side. He uses the structure as a vantage point and thins out the Flood before descending to the ground and moving through the valley between two immense cliff faces. At the far end, another rusted facility, and he enters and moves through the interior spaces before finding more Banished and Flood forces and overhearing humans fighting nearby. He moves deep into the interior and finally comes upon a balcony that overlooks the breach. Nearly at eye level, hovering in the void, is a small blue floating device. Far below, a circular, geometrically patterned platform with the telltale signs of anti-gravity motifs along its edge. An elevator of sorts. And next to the platform, the huge form of a Forerunner ship. Suddenly it all made sense. The Endless would seize whatever it was they needed to activate the breach, while the Flood guarded the entrance to the breach and hampered any attempts at anyone else gaining access. They would then come here, activate the breach, and set the time lock to release, board the Forerunner vessel, and leave. Motivation kicked in to stop this, and he moved as fast as he could to clear the Banished and Flood and gradually moves closer to the human line. He comes across some wounded Marines drawing their last breaths and actually finds himself lamenting their deaths. It all seems so unnecessary now, so needless, so much of a waste. He continues to advance through the facility when he finally can no longer hear humans fighting back. He worries he's lost his chance to make peace with the humans when he enters a room and finds the Master Chief guarding an injured human on the ground. The Chief is surrounded by Flood, and this may be his only chance to make peace. If there was anyone to make peace with, it would be the Master Chief, because at least he has the reputation amongst his people to convince them that he actually means well. Realizing there's no clear, concise solution to this issue, he'll either aid the Master Chief and die trying, or he'll succeed and the Master Chief will attempt to kill him anyway. Or he may just have the time to explain. At this point, there was no time to debate, and he launches into action. He kills the Flood around the Chief, and after finishing the last one off, he turns to the Chief, deactivates his mace as a sign of peace, and raises his palms. That's where Aatrox's retelling of the events ends. "So why are you here now?" Lasky asked. "Your doctors healed me, and I explained to the Master Chief the dire situation we have unwittingly stumbled into." The Chief takes over and explains that the Endless have betrayed Aatrox and are only using the Banished to achieve their goals. They're looking for the time lock breach and plan to leave the ring and activate the lock as they do, killing everyone and everything that is left on the ring. Aatrox steps in and explains that they turned on him and killed his bodyguards, and then as he tried to tell the rest of his banished captains that the Endless had betrayed them, unleashed the Flood, and intended to kill them all, the Endless convinced the remaining captains that Atriox had betrayed them. He fought for his life, and knew the only way to fight and possibly survive would be together, and that was why he was here. That if he could speak to his captains and reason with them, make them see that the Flood are attacking them, but not the Endless, make them see that the Endless mean them ill, he may just be able to convince the Banished to fight with them. Lasky asks how. Atriox smiles. And that's the end of the 2029 DLC, Lasky. And this video is already over 35 minutes in length. I know I said this was going to be the third and final part, but we have one level left to do, which I will have to put into a fourth and final piece, as what I wrote is much too large to put in this one and have this video be under an hour. So, join me for part 4, when we cover the final DLC that could have been released in 2030, based loosely on the Halo CE narrative. A recreation of the Maw, and in our case, simply called Out of Time. And until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stella, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.